Hi Guava Bees, and welcome to another episode of the Dear Guava Bean podcast. Remember, submit your questions in the Guava box or on the website, and we could be answering yours in the next episode. I'm Francesca, and with me is Claire.
Hello.
And today's question is, Dear Guava Bean, does anyone know of remote types of work where you don't need a strong internet connection to do the work? I love this one. And this is something I've definitely had some really horrible experiences with when I've had poor internet connection. Is this something that affects you, Claire? I've certainly had troubles with this when traveling, particularly. And what about you?
I had some trouble with it in the beginning, I think, when you're just getting started and you don't know what to look for in like a place where you're traveling to. It can be really difficult to get a reliable connection. And so I really struggled with this at first. But now I have, I prioritize my internet. And so I have really good internet. I have a pretty stable office, so I'm not moving around a lot. So it doesn't bother me now. But I'd love to know, like in your experience, what you've done that has been a good job for like internet connections that are not too strong.
Okay, so this is something I definitely had to think a lot about, because when I started out as a freelancer, I was mainly doing, so when I first started out, I was doing writing, which doesn't really need like a strong internet connection, which was good because where I was living, I had to use one of those little dongle things that you put data on that you top up manually. That was the only way I could get online at the time. And then when I moved into my new place, my new apartment, when my freelancing business took off, I actually was doing customer service jobs. Now, this is where it really got tricky, because with a customer service job, you have to be online between a certain, time frame. So you're sort of covering live chat, phone calls, that kind of thing. You need to make sure that internet is consistent, and that is where I was having trouble. So I would say now the best kind of job I do is what I do currently, and that is community management and content creation. And that is purely because I don't have to rely on having internet to actually do my job. So there's a lot of things that you can schedule, that you can do offline. So if you're traveling, it doesn't have to be if you're traveling though. I'd like to specify as well that for ages, I paid a lot of money for my internet connection and it was horrible. We were getting bottlenecked and we weren't getting like the consistency we should have. So now I actually pay for a business line which is installed separately to the residential line, which never drops. And that is like, for me now, I'm able to justify that. So as I say, as well as that good internet connection, I now I've deliberately crafted this career around the work I can basically do whenever I want to. So if I do miraculously get cut off, which I won't, but if I do, I don't have to panic, because you can, with this kind of job, you can basically schedule the things. You can set aside time when you know you have internet, you can schedule it, and then it just does it. Like when you have the internet, you can just upload whatever you need to upload. You can schedule your post to go out, and then you don't have to worry about it. That's what I think anyway. I just think for me, I've definitely been in some really tricky situations, and like it's horrible because then you feel like you're letting cut clients down when you're basically saying I don't have an internet connection, because you feel like as a freelancer you should have that. You should have that mastered. Like you should have a backup plan if your internet goes out. And then when you don't, it's like, oh, I'm a terrible freelancer. Like I've really let everyone down. And sometimes those things are just unforeseen and you just can't really do anything about it. But that only really happens with those kind of like, as I say, like the customer service jobs it was for me, because you had to be online at a certain time. So yeah, that's really been my experience with it, I would say.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. So you schedule your community management work in advance?
Yeah, so rather than the work hours being set by my client, which has happened in the past, which is fair. Like with customer support, they need help with their customers and they needed me to be online between a certain time. It was almost like being a remote worker rather than a freelancer. Does that make sense? So they were sort of telling me when my work hours should be. So I had to ensure that I was online and that my calls wouldn't drop, that I was still online to take live chats. Because when that happens, and it has happened a few times, as I say, it's really scary. Because not only are you letting your clients down, but you're letting their customers down as well, which is it's a horrible feeling. Like if you want to maintain a good reputation, you feel like you're letting everyone down. It's no good. So yeah, I do schedule my work now. I have taken my workload into my own hands and I can do it whenever I want to. And that's purely just because of the nature of the job. Being a community manager, it doesn't really need you to be online in real time responding to people. It tends to be more of a overseeing things and, sort of comments and posts and things on social media platforms and in private membership groups. And it just makes it a lot easier. It's a lot less stressful. And then when I know that I have certain tasks every month, for example, or every week, I will draw out a plan every month and I will schedule each task on certain days of the week where I know I can just sit down and do them. If I can't, if we have like a power cut or something happens and, there's maintenance and we can't get online, I don't have to panic because I can just move it in my schedule. I can just move stuff around. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to let anyone down. As long as I know that if there's a firm deadline for something that it will get hit, then I allow myself a bit of wiggle room. So that way, I'm planning ahead. That is a big thing now. I would say I definitely plan ahead more and have a plan in case like the worst thing happens and I have to move stuff around, because I really think that the worst thing about having an inconsistent internet connection is the fact you might let your clients down. Like that is horrible and it's not a good situation to be in because then you feel really stressed and, all that stuff.
Yeah, I think that's really smart. I think if you don't have a good internet, finding a job where you can schedule things out in advance. You definitely don't want a job where you need to be on call every day, especially at certain hours of the day. Like I remember when I started, I was a virtual assistant for a while. And that was a really tough job because people want you to be available all the time. They want to email you in the middle of the day. They want you to pick up a task, really quickly. I remember like so many times trying to do, like once I was in transit on a boat trying to book an airplane ticket for one of my clients. And the internet was just crappy. There's so many things that can go wrong when you're in that situation. And I'm glad I never was in a customer support situation where I had clients relying on me. I imagine that must be even more difficult.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I've been a virtual assistant as well, and it is horrible when you know that you've got people relying on you. But yeah, with customer support, it's like you've got your client and you've got their customers. So it's like everyone's, banging down your door saying, "Why aren't you online?" And it's really it doesn't it's not like it's something that happened every day, but when it did happen, it was just panic stations. And it's not good to be in that kind of high stress situation. Like you say, being a virtual assistant, you have that as well. You know that someone's relying on you, especially if they're super busy and they're just delegating a lot to you. The last thing they need is for you not to be there, and then they get like a backlog of work and then everyone's stressed and it's just not good. I think that if you are worried about having an inconsistent internet, I mean, that does happen. I know we're getting like 5G and things are getting more stable than they used to be. There's still situations where you may be somewhere quite remote where you can't get a good internet connection, or maybe you're going to a different country and you're not quite sure how to get data and you have to wait to buy like a SIM card or something like that. There's lots of different scenarios. But it's not good to be in that situation. So it is very wise, I would say, to take stock of the kinds of skills and experience you do have, but try and make it so if you're thinking this is going to be like a long-term thing and you want to be able to build up a good reputation and a happy freelancing experience, it's good to look for work where you can create your own schedule and you can put that plan in place. I think having that what is that phrase, under promising and over delivering, I think that's really important to do in this situation. So if you're concerned, and this is something I like to adhere to myself if I can, is if you're concerned that you're going to come up against a potential issue with not being online for a little while, make it super clear from the off with your client that this is, sometimes you might not be online if you're traveling or you have certain expectations where you're not going to be online. Make them aware of that in the beginning of your relationship. But then also sort of give a longer deadline and make sure they're happy with that. So then you're allowing for any kind of times where there might be technical problems or no internet, that kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely know what you mean. It's good to be really clear and set those expectations if it's something that you're concerned about. I know a good job that could be done pretty much offline or without a good internet connection. One of the first jobs I had was as an editor. I liked to edit novels. It was like an easy job to get on freelancer.com. And I would proofread and edit these novels. I mean, sometimes it was just like a long report and it was like really dry and boring, but most of the time people write their own sci-fi novels or whatever.
Wow! Oh, that's so
And then they want to
exciting.
publish them. Yeah, and then the cheapest way to get their novel edited or proofread is to go through a freelancer. So that's a really easy job because you get a Microsoft Doc pretty much. And you can do that offline. You can you can edit an entire book offline and then just send it to the client when you have the time. So that is if you do any type of editing or even copywriting. A lot of copywriting can be done offline. You do need internet to communicate and maybe to do a little research. But if you have Microsoft Word, you can do all of the writing or the editing and the proofreading pretty much offline. So yeah, I just remembered that job.
That's so cool. I didn't know you did that. Was there any like big names or like any books we might have heard of, Claire?
No, you would think that there would be, but no, it was not like that at all. It's really, really small, usually just like one person publishing their own book.
Yeah,
I read a
love
book
that,
like a
though.
dad created a book about baseball that he wanted his son, he like wanted to pass on to his son. It was like a lot of life lessons, told through baseball.
I love
And just cool
that.
stuff like that. Yeah, it was a fun job to do. And you can find those jobs on, Upwork or Freelancer or Pay Per Hour. Any of those job websites will have a section for editing and proofreading. That's the kind of job that you can do, without too much internet.
Yeah, I actually love that because it's reminded me that pretty much there's a lot of creative jobs out there that you could also do without the internet. So I know some things like graphic design, video editing, that kind of thing, they do sometimes require a bit of online research, but usually that kind of thing comes with like a design brief. So if you're thinking of doing something creative, like I said, you're designing a logo, for example, or a business card, or you're editing together a YouTube video for somebody or a presentation, they usually have a design brief which you can then save and refer back to as you're working. And a lot of these things use tools where, again, like you say with your editing, you can do that in Microsoft Word. And a lot of these kind of designing or video editing is using tools where you don't need to be on the internet. And in a way, I feel like they have an advantage by not being on the internet, because I know it's slightly different, but you can get distracted easily with the internet sometimes. And I think actually being offline to do your work can be a good benefit to actually getting better results and being able to concentrate more. I certainly found that myself. So it's almost like turning a negative into a positive sometimes. Being offline can be actually good for your productivity and the quality of your work too. And again, like I've done video editing, a little bit of video editing. I'm far from like a pro, I suppose, but there's those kinds of jobs you can find places like People Per Hour as well. Even simple like animation videos or voice work as well you can do. So voiceovers for videos can be an amazing choice. And they pay really well, actually. If you get some good experience, they pay really well. So that can also be a great job to do.
Yeah, that's a good one. I haven't thought about voiceovers, like narrating. I had a friend who used to do like short gigs, just doing like voiceovers for training materials or stuff like that. I know there are those types of jobs. And then there's also, I can't remember now. I just had one that was a good idea for offline work, but it was similar to what you were saying about like graphic design and video editing. You can use offline tools if you specialize in an offline tool like Photoshop or InDesign. If you specialize in photo editing, for example, that can be done pretty much offline if you have the tools to do it. So, yeah, you could turn a negative into a positive, like you said, and find an offline tool and then just specialize in that one thing and try to make your niche in it. But I do think it takes a lot of thought first. You know, you're not just going to wander into a great career that you can do offline. It's going to be something that you have to build up and maybe, you know, do a little bit of work for a really low rate until you get the reviews, and then you can go out on your own and like get the really good clients. But whenever there's a will, I'm sure there's a way. There's a lot of different freelance jobs out there. There's so much that you can do without a good internet connection.
I think so too. And you make a good point. I think it's not something that's going to happen overnight. And sometimes you have to go through these tricky situations where you realize that maybe having an inconsistent internet connection is a problem in order to then change the way you work. So, for example, like I said, that's definitely been an issue for me in the past. Oh my goodness, this is probably one of the scariest things that happened, was traveling and having a big workflow and just assuming I could deal with it, and I couldn't because my internet actually it didn't work basically where I was staying. I thought it would and it didn't, and it's, you know, in hindsight I probably should have done a bit more planning and probably taken on less work. But you know, you're always in that situation where you feel like you don't want to let people down, so you're just like, yeah, I'll be fine, just I'll take on the extra stress of being in this situation. And it doesn't work because it ends up turning around and sort of biting you in the bum. So it's definitely something you want to really think about. And it's something that happens over years. Well, it did for me. You know, as I say, I worked for years in kind of customer support and needing that. I guess the difference is I needed a consistently solid internet connection, whereas now I don't. I can just go online, do what I need to do, and come offline. And that took years to kind of realize it was a problem and then develop this system, which I have now, which feels much less stressful. So, yeah, I mean, another thing that I would probably add to this, and the fact that it is probably something that isn't going to just happen straight away, is it depends where you are in your freelancing career, but potentially as well as active income, you can look at creating a passive income, which doesn't really require any internet connection once you've created the thing that you're creating, whether that's like a course or a video series or something like that. There's sort of passive ways that you can create income as well, using your expertise, using, you know, your skills. And I know people who've created courses based on, you know, like I've said, sort of video editing, or they've got really skilled in a certain area of, say, travel, and they know how to find good deals, and so they built a website, and now it's like a subscription model, and they don't have to actually be online all the time. So, I mean, that might be going a bit far into the future if you're a new freelancer, but definitely something to consider if you're thinking long term that internet might be a problem.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's good to mention. We're assuming that this person is starting out, but it could be someone who's experienced and wants to move into work that is less online. And so doing a passive income stream could help with that, or hiring someone and delegating the day-to-day work to them. You know, if you have the resources to do that, you can offload the client communication, and then you can just do the type of work that you don't need to be online all the time for. That's an idea too. So there's lots of different ways that you can approach it. It just depends where you're at and, what resources you have. If you're just getting started, I would say copywriting and copy editing are probably the easiest jobs to get without a strong internet connection, because you can do them mostly offline. And I think that's a pretty easy niche to get started in, because you can pretty much write about anything that or anything that you're interested in. There's a lot of writing jobs out there, and so that's something that you can start with and then work your way into another job like you have. Like, you've worked your way into a career that allows you to be offline more often.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that writing is a fantastic suggestion. I know it's something we've both done in the past. I can definitely say that it's, you can make good money if you get, you use your knowledge in a certain area, but you can also learn new knowledge as well. You can, there's lots of courses out there if you're not quite sure on what kind of writing you want to do. It is something a beginner is able to do, but it does definitely pay to get into a good niche, I think, with writing. But, we'll start somewhere. And, for someone who's got patchy internet, definitely a good suggestion. I think any kind of, like I've said already, but any kind of creative work which doesn't require you to be online with a consistent internet does work quite well. I know a lot of people who started out in graphic design, for example, and designing things like business cards, or even, I guess not letterheads these days. We are going back a few years, but maybe presentation slides, or even social media post templates and things like that. There's loads of things you could do where you don't need to be like the best of the best. You just need to get good at your area, and it's something you can always improve on. But those are definitely things that are beginner friendly you could do.
Yeah, good suggestions. I think we've covered this one.
We hope you enjoyed listening to the Dear Guava Bean podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and follow Guava Bean on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter for updates and new episodes. As always, our goal is to empower you with the information, inspiration, and direction you need to achieve financial freedom through online work. For more content like this, join us in the Guava Bean Freelancer Toolbox. Just go to guavabean.com to start your free trial now. Thanks for listening and supporting the podcast. See you in the next episode.